We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air.
At the start of World War II, Northern Ireland saw little of the action that the rest of the United Kingdom was experiencing. But that was soon to change.
Initially, as the sort of war clouds started to gather back in the early 30s, the attitude was very much based on the south of England and England in general, and the threat to London from the air and so on. Northern Ireland was considered very much a backwater. The balance didn't shift until the war had begun, and it was only once France fell in 1940 that the planners suddenly realised that all their previous plans had been put out of joint. Northern Ireland suddenly became a lot more significant, and there were a great rush made to try and rectify the mistakes that they made previously, get Northern Ireland into the strategic priority list. The most significant feature was a massive building project to try and increase the number of airfields in the province. Because it was suddenly on the front line, so to speak, they needed airfields not just for training and for storage that they had previously. They also had to have active airfields to enable bombers to reach out into the Atlantic for patrol purposes. They also had to look at the extreme possibility of invasion, because that was on the cards as a possibility. And of course then, with German bombers being so much closer to Belfast, they also had to think of fighter defences and aircraft defences, because suddenly Belfast was a priority target.
On the outbreak of the Second World War, there were only 3 airfields in Northern Ireland: Aldergrove, Sydenham and Newtownards. And to those existing airfields were added 22 new airfields. And the new airfields included one at Longcash.
There was no work in the village at all, no work. And then, once the first sod was cut, work for all the labouring men that was in the village.
All manual labour, those. Oh, dear knows how many of them army men were in there, the Royal Engineers.
It was very hard work too, because the runways were all laid with concrete, and concrete couldn't be put down everywhere by the machine, any sort of machinery they had in those days. So they had to wheel it in ordinary barrows. Men with long-tailed shovels would spread it, others would tip it out of a barrow. Dozens of men doing that all day, you know.
Back in them days, what they call the pitched the stones, the hand placed the stones with the broad end up, if they could find one, and the point of the stone down in the muck. So as when the weight come on it, that went down and the stone was made a wedge. They couldn't get down any farther. They could only go down a certain distance. They couldn't get down no farther. So that was the idea of the hand pitching in the boggy ground. And it stood its course. It's there yet for everybody to see.
It was said in Richie's pub in Hillsborough on a Friday night, there was half a Longcash runways on the floor after they went away again. The boys just came up from their work and with the concrete over their boots, had their few drinks and went back home again.
The new airfields fulfilled a very great variety of purposes. Some accommodated fighter squadrons for the defence of Belfast and Londonderry and Lough Erne. Some were simple storage sites. Others were used to accommodate training units, including a number of airfields which were eventually handed over to the United States Army Air Force. The really important ones were used to accommodate maritime aircraft operated by Royal Air Force Coastal Command flying boat bases such as Castle Archdale on Lough Erne and later on then Killadees, which of course was in the front line of the war against the U-boats in the Battle of the Atlantic.
The bases that we had with Ballykelly, May down there, Eglinton, right down to Castle Archdale, Killadees and St Angelo, they all played a big part in the Battle of the Atlantic.
People have never been told to this day what was lost in the Atlantic. Ships loaded with brand new machinery, trucks, everything, aircraft, everything were sunk. Oil by the 1,000 gallons, all sent to the bottom of the sea.
Being the most westerly point of the United Kingdom, that allowed aircraft based in Northern Ireland to reach just that little bit further into the Atlantic, to provide just that little bit extra cover for the convoys coming from America. And that was perhaps the closest that Britain came to being cut out of the war, to losing its supply of food and material coming from America. So Northern Ireland was quite vital in that respect of permitting that extra protection from the aircraft.
Flying boats operating out of Lough Erne were hampered by the fact that initially they would have had to fly round the north of Donegal, and that used up precious fuel and took a lot of time. As a result of discussions between the United Kingdom and ERA governments, an air corridor was agreed running west from Lough Erne over the town of Ballyshannon in ERA, through which the flying boats from Lough Erne and indeed other aircraft operating from Northern Irish bases were able to go directly into the Atlantic Ocean.
At the start, the British were at wit's end. They didn't know, they couldn't control the U-boats. The U-boats were going out in packs, 5, 10, 15 of them going out together and swarming, going out round a convoy, and they took as many ships as they could take out of that convoy. But then with negotiations, the British got the Lake Submarine in Enniskillen turned into Sunderland bases, Catalina bases. It was a Catalina from Enniskillen direction that spotted the Bismarck to give the Navy his position, and that was the end of it. So they did play a very, very big part. The Catalina was one of the worst looking and worst shaped aircraft in the sky. Slow, cumbersome, but deadly as far as submarines were concerned.
Once we spotted a submarine, we had to get down and have our depth charges released in 25 seconds. If we didn't, the U-boat commanders and crews were so well trained that they could get the submarine below depth charge depth. I remember one particular case where we caught a submarine and there were 5 deck hands obviously attending to someone on the deck of the submarine. And obviously when the word went down that an aircraft was sighted, they dived and left the 5 people in the water. 5 men were nothing compared to a submarine and a crew of men.
So much of the American build-up that took place in the UK prior to the invasion of Europe initially began in Northern Ireland as a first staging post. Both the naval reinforcements coming into the likes of Londonderry, but particularly troops and aircraft using the air bases that had been built in that quick rushed period of 1940 to 41. And you'll find that so many of the American involvement in the war once they arrived found its way through Northern Ireland to begin with, before ending up on the boats and the aircraft heading off to France eventually in 1944.